Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Weekend Watch Repair. My name is Adam, and welcome to our first full length video of 2024. I hope everyone had a great holiday and a great new year. What we have on the bench today is really special. This is a solid 14 karat rose gold Omega dating to 1944. I've been sitting on this project for a couple months, and if you're a regular watcher of the channel, if this is not your first video, you've probably noticed I tend to stick to the more affordable side of things, even though I think they're super cool. I mean, I love vintage Seikos. If you haven't watched my channel before, I've got a lot of old vintage Seikos, especially chronographs. I have a soft spot for them. But I a solid rose gold Omega was not in my budget to get on the channel. And so the story of how this watch got on my bench is pretty special. We'll get into that here in a minute. I'm doing some function testing here, put some wind in it, and I noticed the sub-seconds hand wasn't going. So we'll give it a little shake here to see if we can get that started. And yeah, it seems to be ticking away. So we'll go ahead and continue to tear this down. We'll remove these spring bars here. These are quick release spring bars. This is an alligator leather strap. It's not original to the watch by any means. It was on it when I got it. This watch is 14 karat rose gold. The clasp on that is not gold. It's plated stainless steel. This thing has a snap-on case back. So I'll use my case knife here. I rarely use this one, but it kind of fit the bill for this watch. We'll go ahead and pop that back off and take a look at this. These Omega movements are just always gorgeous, and especially back then, that thing is just pretty. One thing I noticed though, actually, we'll take a look here. You can see inside the case back here, we have our Swiss hallmarks, the 14 karat 0.585 gold content. There's not a specific symbol back then for rose gold. But I noticed when we turn this watch dial down, it stopped. You can see here, moving the balance in that position, it does not want to go. So I'm going to flip it back over to dial up, give it a shake again. And yeah, that second hand seems to tick away. It runs in this position, albeit probably not very well. But as soon as we flip it over, stop, hit the brakes on the balance. So we'll do it one more time here. And when I got this watch, they were saying it didn't run. And I wind it in my hand and holding it and looking at it, it would run. But this is the first time actually on the bench, and here's where I found when it would run and when it wouldn't. So it seems to run fine there, and as soon as we flip it over, it just crunches, just running into a brick wall. That balance just stops. So my first thought was that I had a broken balance pivot, an upper balance pivot. But moving that wheel around, that does not seem to be the case. It does not act like I have a broken balance staff. So we'll just have to get into it and see. And I can tell there's definitely some corrosion on here. You can take a look at these case back screws. Remember how these things look right now, because I did some work on them later before we reinstall them. We refinish those screws, but there's a fair bit of corrosion on this thing. And that's one of the things that I try to do some homework on, because I'm not a vintage Seiko historian. So I consulted, there's obviously no shortage of vintage Omega enthusiast websites and forums and Facebook groups. And I actually went on there and posted a few things, because we'll see some corrosion later on as we take apart this movement that looked kind of odd. Yeah, taking a look at that staff, or excuse me, that stem. There's a little bit of rust on the edge of it. That's actually not too bad. I honestly expected a little bit worse. But in order to remove this movement from the case, it needs to come out the front. So we unscrew the case screws, and now I'm going to use my case knife again and remove the crystal in the bezel. And it pops off just like the case back does. And that dial has definitely seen some use. I kind of like it personally. I mean, there's some marks on it a little bit, but I mean, it doesn't look pristine. It doesn't look new. And I think a watch like this, it looks odd if it's perfect, in my opinion, nowadays. Now, redials and all that, some of them make really good ones, but if you're going to go original, I like that look of, there's tiny little marks on there. There's not a giant gash in the dial, but you can just tell it's It's weathered, it's 80 years old, and it looks like a well-kept 80-year-old watch. So I'm going to go ahead and put the stem back in, remove the hands, and begin disassembly of that. I went ahead and tightened that screw back in to secure that stem, but we're going to go ahead and line these hands up and pull these off. So this watch here, this movement is a 30 Omega 30T2. And that is a base 30 caliber movement. They began making those in 1939. They made them all the way up until 1963. And the 30T2 is Omega's old numbering system. That was the base 15 jewel movement. This is exactly what we have here. And then they had upgrades and different revisions of that movement. There was a 30T2 PC that had ankle block, shock protection, and I believe later on it had a temperature compensated balance wheel. There's a 30T2 SC, which was for sweep seconds. So this would have a seconds hand in the middle, not a sub-seconds hand. There was an RG model, which was a chronometer grade movement. 30T2 PC SC, and so on and so forth. I think there was an AM also in 1949. They changed their numbering system, so this 30T2 movement became caliber 260, and then the 30 movements were based on calibers 260 and 280, and then it moved on from there. There's a lot of history with this watch, and this movement here is the very first model. So yeah, a lot of history on that. So this particular watch, as we go ahead and remove some of the wind out of it, you'll kind of notice some like green and looking marks on some of these bridge plates and everything else. And as we take this movement apart, I was kind of curious about that because it seemed to be on the contacting surfaces of the bridges and the plates, or on the plates to the watch case. And you can kind of see there on the train wheel bridge some of that stuff on there, and a little bit on the top of the balance staff. And to me, that actually looks like oxidation. So I went on to one of those vintage Omega forums and a website, and I uploaded a couple photographs and posed the question: does this look like oxidation to you, or what's going on? Because that stuff did come off. It took a lot of scrubbing, but it comes off. And someone had come in there on the there's a website that someone who did it. So someone had published a book about vintage Omegas, and he was an active user on that site. And so he said they did like a metallurgical analysis of those vintage Omega movements because they were trying to figure out what the plating is. And by the way, here's the upper pivot on that balance staff, and there's the lower pivot, and they seem to be good. They're a little bit dirty right now, but nothing major. We definitely don't have a broken balance staff, which is great. So they said on the rose gold plated movements that they did in some of the rose gold watches, that the original alloy, which that person had said is sometimes unstable and you would see some of this corrosion that I'm seeing, is because they said this alloy, the plating that's on these movement parts, is around 85% copper, 10% silver, and 2.5 to 3% gold and zinc. And with that high of a copper content, you'll see some oxidation and whatnot. Later on, they came up with a different alloy for their rose gold plate, which he said was 10 to 20% copper, 80% ish gold, and a couple percent zinc. And that color actually really matches some of their non-rose gold plated watches. But anyways, they all kind of have that same color, but that's where he did. And I have no reason to doubt him. I am definitely not a historian on that, but what he said definitely made sense as far as the type of corrosion that I saw on here. But nevertheless, and it took a lot of scrubbing, and like that stuff around the lower barrel arbor port you see on the backside of that main plate, I had to scrub on that a lot harder than anything else to clean that up. But this watch has definitely, seen some use. Yeah, you can definitely see those marks around the barrel arbor pivot. But yeah, it came along great. So that guy was really helpful. He had a book published, and I was asking him because I was trying to find the actual model name of this watch. Is it a DeVille or what? And because on the dial it says Omega, but not an actual model number. And he said, well, this one here, dates to 1944. He said Omega released their first model name was the Seamaster. and that came out in 1948. Prior to that, they had a bunch of watches, obviously, but there is model numbers, but not name references. So, and I don't know what it actually is on this watch, but the Seamaster came out in 48, and they had the Constellation, Genève, a Deville, a Tresor or Tresor. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. They didn't come out necessarily that order, but the Seamaster was the first. But this predates the first Seamaster by 4 years, which I thought was pretty cool. And I learned quite a bit of history on these old vintage Omegas. I've always been a fan of them and how they looked. But, this watch gave me a reason to kind of dig into that history, which I thought was real neat. So, yeah, history lesson over. Back to this watch. This movement, we stated earlier that this movement here kind of came to me. Typically, I mean, I fund all this stuff for the channel. We have definitely support from patrons, which is huge. But, buying, at least a couple watches a month to work on, plus parts and all that, can get really expensive. So typically, I before this happened, I didn't anticipate a solid rose gold vintage Omega being on my bench anytime soon. So what happened was, very nice gentleman named Peter reaches out to me, and people reach out to me. I mean, quite a few have recently, and they've asked to, hey, would you mind servicing a watch, this and that, and I've had to politely turn them down, and I've given them my reasons, which I've stated on the channel before, and a couple of them are, there's a liability issue that I am, I'm not an insured professional. To lack of a better term, I'm a hobbyist. I don't make my living doing this. And, privacy issues as well. I do this out of my home. I don't want to broadcast my address out to everyone to ship watches to. I need to get a P.O. box and a few things set up. And so right now there's a few roadblocks. So, I've unfortunately had to turn down some requests, and a lot of them I really wanted to get my hands on the watch. But, I do this in the evening time, after work, in off hours, and sometimes it takes a while to get through a watch. And I just, people waiting on me to be finished with it. It would just add complications to what is otherwise an enjoyable hobby. So, although I sympathize with a lot of the requests, I'm just not in a place where I can do it. So, this gentleman, Peter, reaches out to me. And at first, I thought he was asking me if I would service this watch, which, I'm drooling over the thought of having this on my bench because I'd love to. But, I'm thinking, well, no, I can't. And then reading his message further, and he's a member, messaged me through Patreon. He said, he has a rather substantial watch collection. This was his father's watch, but frankly, it's just not his style. And he would like to see it running again. And what he actually offered, his initial offer, he said he would like to, basically, for lack of a better term, donate it to the channel if I could at least make an attempt to repair it and make a video for it. And, if Peter wants to leave something in the comments, he'll tell you I initially turned down that request, even though, I mean, hey, that's a free solid gold Omega. Who would turn that down? But, I said, Peter, I don't feel right about accepting this gift. And, he had expressed, he'd have to pay to get it serviced, and then he sells it on eBay. He may only get, he thought he would get basically its worth in scrap weight, which I told him again, I think he would get a better price for this watch than he thought. But he come back and, he said, hey, I'd really like to, give this to you and, just make a video of it. And let's just see what, what comes up. But he made it clear he was offering it to the channel. And, I thought about that and I was going to turn him down again, but I thought, well, how do you turn that down? It's like, how do you turn that down? I've already turned him down once, but, he was very polite. And, we communicated a lot. And then eventually he shipped me the watch and I've had it for a few months. I've had other things to work on, but that's how this thing came to my bench. And this is the only watch I have ever accepted in such a manner, outside of the friends and family network, that I just typically, if the watch isn't mine, that's where it came from. This is the only watch I've ever done that was kind of outside of that, but man, what a watch and what a generous offer from Peter. So thank you, Peter, for real. This is it was an honor to work on this thing. So we're taking this thing apart here, and I'm going to take off the center wheel, and I'm going to keep the original audio in. You can kind of hear my reaction when I pull this wheel out. Whoa. Well, you can see why I kind of said that out loud. I just thought I'd keep that in the video, but that's what the pinion on that center wheel looked like. Maybe one of the reasons. I mean, I don't know. That ain't going to help nothing for sure. There is our third wheel. And our fourth wheel here has an extended pivot on the bottom of it. That is where the seconds hand actually mounts to. So that seconds hand spinning on the dial is physically attached to that longer pivot there. And our escape wheel right here. There we go. There we go. Finally, it goes off camera. Now our mainspring barrel. And this is just a gorgeous movement. As you can see there, it's pretty simple, but man, they took a lot of time and really, really built these solidly and beautifully too. We're going to go ahead and separate the lid from the barrel here. And I'll just kind of use some brass tweezers and gently work that around. Now, I don't want to pry on one side of it, that you could easily bend to these things. So I'm just kind of spinning it and letting the width of the tweezers begin to separate that, and pop the lid off there. And there's our mainspring. We'll go ahead and pull the arbor out. And people have asked me before, those are Dumont 7B tweezers, I believe, but there's kind of the serrated tips on there. I really only use those tweezers for that function, or big springs, but it allows me to get a grip on those arbors. Really handy. At first I bought them early on in kind of my watchmaking journey, thinking I would use them a lot for parts, but they're kind of too big for parts, but they work perfect for that. So there's the original style mainspring. You can see there, it's got a little bend in it, but we had plans on replacing that anyway. I'm going to go ahead and run it through the cleaner and everything else. But speaking of cleaning, I'm starting some pre-cleaning here. I won't show, I'm going to show you 5% of it because I spent a lot of time scrubbing this thing and trying to get a lot of that oxidation off. But right now I'm just kind of focusing on pegging the jewels. And here I'm just going to begin kind of using some pegwood, trying to get a lot of that oxidation or whatever that gunk is off the sides of these plates. I'm pretty sure it's oxidation. I have no reason to doubt that gentleman that explained it and said it's because of the higher copper content in the plating on this alloy. But we got the watch fully disassembled and pre-cleaned. So now we're going to go ahead and load it up into our baskets. This is the first one actually on the channel that I'm putting screws and everything in, because I mean, this watch here does not have a whole lot of screws. I'm organizing them with each individual part. So just to keep track of it, typically I do the screws manually and store them labeled in a little system I've created. That way every screw goes back into its original spot. But this one here, it's a real simple watch, mechanically speaking. So everything's going to go in there together. Now we have our cleaning machine. This thing here is my Elma machine. It's a manual machine. It's got 1 wash cycle and 3 rinse cycles. And the last stage is a drying cycle. While this thing is going, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the patron members who really make this video possible. I really don't think I could do it without you. A special shout out to Daryl, Jay Welchie, Keith, Ben, and Robert, our newest members. Thank you all so much. And thank you again to Peter. His name was on this list. This video definitely wouldn't be happening without his generosity and kindness. So thank you all so much. If you're interested in taking a look, you can sign up for free. I believe on Patreon, they allow free users. I'm not a patron expert, to be honest with you, but if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so there. There's information in the description of the video. So while this stuff was cleaning, I removed a bunch of the gunk off the case and I put it through an ultrasonic, but I wanted to see if I could kind of bring back some of the shine on this rose gold case. So we're building a little concoction here. So what you see in there is baking soda, and I'm applying some salt, equal amounts of both. And in this pan with aluminum foil, shiny side up, and then applying some hot water. Not boiling, but just shy of it. It's pretty hot. And we're going to take this mixture, and there's some cuts in here. It all looks like one shot, but there is some cuts. So we kind of get that in there and then stir this mixture up and try to even it out as much as possible. We're going to go ahead and dunk our case parts in here. Here's the case back. There's the case, and there is the bezel. Oop. There's the bezel. So I let this sit. Total soak time is about 15 minutes. I'm going to kind of play around with it here for a little bit, and I want to take a look and just see what's happening. It's probably about 5 minutes have passed thus far. Maybe kind of hard to tell on camera. I know my lighting here is not the greatest, but I can see a little bit. I mean, it is a little bit better. Maybe it's wet. It looks better, but I wanted to strengthen up the mixture a little bit, so I'm going to add some more baking soda. And at first, I was trying to be scientific and measure it, and now we're just we're eyeballing it, but trying to put equal amounts of baking soda and salt in there and kind of strengthen that up a little bit, mix it around, kind of dissolve as much of it as I can, and then let this sit a little bit longer. Again, total soak time is about 15 minutes. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and remove these parts out of here. And I'm only trying to be very careful. Plastic tools and everything else. I mean, gold's a very soft metal, so I don't want to go banging around a whole lot of stuff in here. There we go. I'm just going to grab that case back. There we go. Now I need to rinse these off. So I have some clean water here. I'm going to go ahead and dunk those in there. Let them sit for a minute. Then I'm just going to give them a shake inside the water and just rinse off each part. And I can really tell, I can really tell it that did make a difference. I debated on if I wanted to go any further with this, and I did. So what I ended up doing after this was I took it and went very, very lightly with my softest cloth mop and some red rouge, which is really meant for gold. And so just kind of cleaned it up a little bit further and kind of brought the luster back on this gold case, which I think turned out great. But that process there actually worked. Now I've got the original crystal here because I have ordered two different crystals for this, and both of them were not as advertised. So I decided, you know what, fine, we're just going to try to refinish this original crystal. So I'm doing the first coat of Polywatch on here, and I ended up putting about 4 or 5 coats on there. And I actually got this crystal pretty good. There's one little mark on it that was a little bit deeper than what I wanted to go, and if I honestly didn't tell you about it, you'd probably never see it. But there's kind of one little mark on there. But you wear the watch, you don't even tell. You have to have the light has to hit it just right, and in order to see it. Now we're going to go ahead and lubricate the bottom balance jewel setting. So there's our cap jewel, and you can see that round dab of oil in the middle of that capstone. And I'm somewhat embarrassing. I'm probably going to hear my mother's probably going to message me. She enjoys these videos, and which I'm glad she does. She was never a watch person, but I told her about these things, and so she's watched them. She's learned. She said, "Adam, your hands are shaking," and I said, "I know. I didn't eat, so I've got some shaky hands." At points through the rest of this video, which I'm sure I'm going to hear about. So I went ahead and loosened the screw for the hairspring stud, and went ahead and removed this balance assembly. I'm just this has been through one dip once as a complete unit, but I'm going to clean the parts individually again. But taking a look at this, and that hairspring looks nice and flat. The Breguet overcoil you can see there looks really good. I'm not seeing really any issues. Those pivots cleaned up quite nicely. So in order to remove this cap setting here, a lot of times you have screws on the underside of the balance you have to remove, but this thing here's got this little clip sort of thing. It's got a beveled edge where the wider part of the bevel is on the bottom, and it cuts into the feet of that capstone setting, just like dial feet screws do to attach dial feet. Really smart way to do it. Actually, I kind of liked it. It was on there pretty stiff. It took some pressure to get it off, but I like the thought process behind that. It's the first time I've run into that. Maybe that's a common Omega thing. Not real sure, but it's the first time I'd seen it. So I went ahead and scrubbed these stones again, ran them through one dip again, just to make sure everything was nice and spotlessly clean. And we're going to go ahead and reassemble this thing, and got the balance, or got the jewel setting in there, and I got the regulating arm on it. And just like we did with the bottom one, I'm going to just go ahead and manually oil these. I could use my automatic oiler, but I don't do it. I don't show this side of it very often. So you can see that light hits it pretty good there. I'm going to put a little bit more oil in there. To my eye, that's just barely not enough. Another little dab of oil, trying to keep it, a dot in the center as good as I possibly can. And now I need to put this balance bridge back on there without disturbing that oil. I think we got kind of lucky there. Everything sat down nicely. Now I need to go ahead and put in this clip again. Easier said than done when you haven't eaten and you got shaky hands, but there we go. I'm just kind of working it around until it finds kind of the right position. And then it's just simply the correct size flathead screwdriver. If I can get it in that slot. Oop. There it is. And just tightening it. As you tighten it, it kind of squeezes against those feet and holds everything securely in position. I really like that thing. It makes it easy because those, when they're screwed in, those are some of the tiniest screws. And I thought I'd be clever and try to go ahead and tighten the hairspring stud screw. It's way easier to do it on the watch, so I'll do it on the watch in the future, even in this video. But just the first time putting the balance on, it's kind of looking good. But the hairspring, take a look at this thing. You can see how it's kind of bending down a little bit. I went ahead and loosened the hairspring stud screw, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust the position of the stud in the balance cock. And as you can see, after kind of making a few adjustments, you can see how it straightens it up. So these things don't just arbitrarily sit in there. They kind of have to be aligned. So that looks great, but the brigades would touching the underside of the balance. So kind of adjust that down a little bit. And that, to my eye, that looks pretty darn close. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten them. Here's a much better view of tightening that screw. A lot easier to do when it's on the watch. But now what we want to do is kind of look and see where we're at as far as beat error. And so what I'm looking at is position of that jewel, that impulse jewel. Those two arrows represent the banking pins, and you want that jewel to be as dead center between those pins as possible in order to minimize beat error. Because on this watch, you don't have a quick adjustment. You got to do it manually, which is kind of a pain, but it's a lot easier to see it right now when it's kind of disassembled. So we're going to kind of dial this thing in as close as we can. I'm going to adjust it the first time here without removing the hairspring. I hate doing it that way, but you don't have to disassemble the balance. And I thought maybe I'd get lucky and I wouldn't have to adjust it more than once. But as you can see, I overcorrected. So the way you adjust these, if you think about it, looking from the top down on the balance, if you need to turn that roller table counterclockwise in order to move the jewel in the direction you want it to go, when you have this apart, you turn that collet in the opposite direction. So I made a little adjustment there clockwise, which is going to move that jewel counterclockwise on that roller table. And as you can see, I overcorrected back. I'm just a hair off the dead center. So I need to come back a little bit more. So a tiny, tiny adjustment. And take in mind, each time I'm doing this, I'm disassembling that balance each time. But it's a lot safer to do it that way. And so there's third attempt. And to my eye, that's getting really, really close. Real close. I don't think I could dial it in by hand much closer. But if you're doing it while the watch is assembled, I mean, it's difficult to even know what direction to go in. But ideally, I want to get that thing to 1 millisecond or less beat error is ideal. So I got a replacement white alloy mainspring in. This one was on eBay from a seller who said it was specifically correct for this watch. So I got it in. We're installing it here. Just kind of making sure that it worked good. I wasn't kind of a fan. Normally those washers are colored on one side. This one was not. But I put it in the right direction. At first, I took a look at this thing, and the inner coil's not centered, and it looks odd shaped, and it's way too small for the arbor on this watch. So if I bent that spring out as far wide as it needed to be to fit that arbor, take a look at how wide that thing is and how barely it sits on that arbor. I'm not going to keep that spring. So I sourced a correct Omega mainspring for a model 260, which is what this movement later became. Here's the Omega mainspring. And as you can see, that fits in there so much better. And with that arbor not even in there, that inner coil is about center. So there's the bridle pointed to that arrow, and there's the stop on the inside barrel wall. So when we wind this watch for the first time, that arbor's going to, that whole spring assembly is going to turn to the left and hit that stop. And so that spring will seat in place. So now we're just putting some lubrication on the barrel arbor port. I went ahead and lubricated the lower barrel arbor port when I was reassembling with this new Omega mainspring. So that did get done. Now our lid can go on, and we can go ahead and attach this lid just like we do all the other ones. I pop it on my little tool here and just press down on this lid. This one gave a nice affirmative click which they don't always do. But even if you use this tool, make sure, I mean, I'm going to take it out afterwards and hold it under my microscope or whatever magnification you may have. Just make sure that thing's seated fully. Again, you don't have to use one of those tools, but it makes it nice. But always make sure that that lid is totally flush all the way around. So now we can begin assembling this movement. So we get our barrel in, and our train wheel bridge needs to begin with the escape wheel, followed by our fourth wheel with that extended pivot. I'm trying to be careful to make sure that that gets in that jewel. And there it goes. Next up is our third wheel, which, I've stated before, I hate third wheels on Seikos. That one dropped in nice. Thus far, I don't hate third wheels on Omegas. They're treating me well. And our second wheel, or center wheel, whichever you'd like to call it, that went in. It took a lot of work to get that pinion kind of back into working order, but we did. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the train wheel bridge. And so these bridge plates on these movements, the pallet bridge, the train wheel bridge, and all that, there's locator pins where these things sit, and they're a tight fit between the bridge and the plate where those locating pins are. Very tight. So even if your bridge is dead aligned, it's not just going to drop straight down. So I'm kind of working it here very gently. And so the tapping trick wouldn't work on this because it won't just fall into place like Seikos do. But I kind of got that in there and got that escape wheel in, and all the other pivots are in place. I'm going to give this just a quick spin. Even though our barrel bridge isn't on there, it's not going to spin great, but you can kind of tell that, all the pivots are in line on those three pivots. So we're good to go there. You can go ahead and tighten these screws down. So just like every other watch, when I'm doing these, I'm just tightening the screws, just barely hand tight at first, getting them all the way down, giving it a second check, which in this watch, there's no way that thing's going to move the way those locator pins hold that thing so tight. But once everything tests good, we'll go ahead and tighten those down properly. Now we can follow the same procedure for the barrel bridge. This is going to have a pivot for the barrel arbor port and for the center wheel. So we'll just kind of work this around, and there it goes. And there's some locator pins on this as well. And like you can see at the bottom there, that bridge isn't fully all the way down on the main plate yet. So it does need to come down just a hair further. But I work that thing down, make sure it's flat and level. We'll go ahead and put our screws in here. There's 3 screws holding this one in. And we'll just do a final tighten. Now, before the ratchet wheel can go in, we need to go ahead and lubricate the upper barrel arbor port. And so you'll see kind of when we do this, actually, here's a good close-up. So this here is our click spring, kind of interesting little spring. And there is a lip machined onto that main. It doesn't just drop straight in. There's a little lip that kind of goes over the main plate at the very over the spring at the very bottom. So it's kind of got to get underneath that lip. So I'm holding it down with my little hold down tool because the regular camera footage here, my hands are really in the way. So this is the best I could do. But there we go. That spring kind of sitting. You can see that just that hair of a lip that covers, 20% of that spring. Little lubrication there on the post. And on the back side of that spring where it's going to contact the click itself. There's our click. And we'll go ahead and get this thing screwed down and tightened all the way. Somebody's chewed up on that screw. That wasn't me, folks. I mean, that screw, I kind of cleaned it up the best I could outside of sanding it and polishing it. And I actually probably should have done it because I did the case back screws. Later on, I didn't even think about, man, I should take that thing apart and refinish that screw. But all the rust is gone, but it is marred up pretty good from somebody or at least one person, maybe more. There was by the way, there was 2 2 watchmakers marks on this case back. So this watch has been serviced at least twice, probably a lot more than that, but 2 of them marked the case back with it. So now it's time to put in the ratchet wheel. So we get that outer section in, and I'll apply a little bit more lubrication here. Where the ratchet wheel center is going to be stationary there, and that ratchet wheel is going to rotate around it. So there'll be a good amount of contact there. So we'll lubricate that, and there's our ratchet wheel center. That one's held on by 2 screws. Normally, if these are 1 screw, most of the time that'll be a reverse threaded screw. But when you have 2 smaller ones like that with the stationary center, generally those are standard screws. So with that done, I'm taking this opportunity to just double check in shake on the entire wheel train, just to make sure that, I don't want to go any further if I find something really needs adjustment. But everything looked pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the wheel train. And on the back side of this watch, we started off with the center wheel. There's our third wheel. This is our fourth wheel and our escape wheel. And I realized at that point my microscope hadn't been getting a lot of love. So we'll use the microscope for this dial side. There's a good shot there of the center wheel. That's our third wheel. There's our fourth wheel with the extended pivot. Kind of hard to tell because we're almost directly over it, but that's where that extended pivot is. And there's our escape wheel. This is our lower barrel arbor port. You can see that oil kind of gets sucked in there. Pretty decent view of it. So with that done, now comes the pallet fork. And I think my personal opinion, this is one of the bigger challenges in this watch is the pallet fork bridge because the locator pins on here are amazingly tight. And so I kept about a minute of the footage in here and I sped it up. And just so you can see, I just start to slowly work that down because if I just went and pressed down on it, I'd have to use enough force to get past the tension on those locator pins. If I'm not perfectly aligned, I'm going to snap the pivot on that pallet fork, which is obviously, a showstopper. So I just work it down very slowly. It took a while, but it's just kind of necessary in order to get it on there and securely in place and all the way down. But once that's done, we get our 2 screws in and tightened up. Now I want to apply just a few winds, 4 or 5 turns, not a full wind by any means. And check the action of this pallet fork. I'm also checking the locking and unlocking, the depth that the pallet fork stones are engaging with the escape wheel. Everything's looking correct. It looked really good. So now we can apply some grease for the escapement, a little dab on that exit stone, and then I'm going to apply that to 5 teeth at a time. We'll show one full process, but I repeat this process a total of 3 times. Repeat it twice more for a total of 3 times because this escape wheel has 15 teeth. So we'll apply it to 5 teeth at a time. And with that done, we can install our balance. And remind me next time, because my right hand you see on the left side of your screen is blocking the camera view of of the other camera, and I didn't remove it out of the way in time, so we're kind of stuck with this one view. But there we go, hands out of the way. I can use the other camera footage, and I had it overbanked, so I'm lifting it over the pallet fork. And there we go, setting it back down, and now that balance started to fire up, which is a really great feeling. And it really hit me right here because obviously this was the position that the balance would stop in before. And probably for a couple reasons, it was really dirty. That lower pivot was probably very dirty. And I also think, it didn't really show it well on camera, but while I was inspecting the balance on this thing before I disassembled it, it looked like that hairspring may have barely been rubbing the balance arms. I think between straightening, realigning that hairspring properly and cleaning everything properly, we have solved our issue. But that thing's running great. So what I decided to do next up is the time grapher, and what I ended up doing here was this is no adjustments whatsoever. This is literally powering it on without doing anything and seeing where we're at. And take a look at our beat error. We got that thing pretty darn close. It took 3 or 4 adjustments, but I'm not 0.2 milliseconds beat error. I'm not touching it. We're running very slow. Our amplitude's pretty good. It's going to rise up, over time. But I'm taking a look at the trace lines between dial up and dial down, and we're pretty consistent timekeeping. So that's great. So I went ahead and did some initial adjustments. Again, this is a total run time of 45 minutes since we put the balance in. But just kind of initial time setting, nowhere near final regulation, but just taking a look at this trace. And so in the dial down, pretty consistent timekeeping, very acceptable beat error and amplitude right now. We'll go ahead and flip it over, and the little dots you see are the noise and just the microphone picking up stuff as I flip it. Well, it settles in. Now we're in the dial up position. You can see that trace lines are just 1 extra millisecond of beer, between zero point 0.2 and zero point 0.4 milliseconds. Flip the movement back over. It'll run in some more. And then this thing is just super consistent. Super consistent. I could not be more pleased with that. So this thing's going to run in, and it'll get final adjusted later on. But we're going to go ahead and continue with the assembly of the dial side of this watch. Start off here by applying some grease into this hole here. That is where the setting lever post is going to go. Here's our setting lever. Right there. A little trick I like to use in order to put the screw in from the other side is just to put a little blob of Rodico right there. And I'll just go ahead and pull this entire thing off the holder, and that Rodico will hold that setting lever in place. And now I can go ahead and just pop this screw in and screw it in from the other side without that thing kind of falling out of. I usually, before I would, use my fingers and hold it and have to get it at a weird angle. And now I'm considering, well, how do I do that and film it where you can actually see what's going on? So this is the best I got. But, you get the idea that Rodico is a handy little trick. I mean, thing's got 1,000,001 uses. Here's another use. I got the winding pinion and the sliding clutch. Here, we're going to go ahead and apply some heavy grease to the mating surfaces where these two parts are going to contact one another. This is easily the highest friction point in the watch. So just a couple dabs of this thicker grease on here, and as those parts interact, it'll kind of smear that grease around between those mating surfaces. And I'm applying a tad bit more here onto the main plate where that winding pinion is going to sit in there and slide against the main plate in that little channel. So go ahead and we can pop that part in place. Here's our sliding clutch. Oop, there we go. Next up, I want to apply a little bit of grease where the yoke in this channel where the yoke is going to engage with that. Right there. Here's some lubrication for the post for the yoke and our yoke itself. So go ahead and get it on that post, and I want to get it into that groove right there on the sliding clutch. There it goes. And the edge of that yoke is going to interact with the setting lever. So as you pull that crown out, it's going to engage with that yoke and then subsequently move the position of that sliding clutch back and forward, where it'll either engage with the intermediate wheel to actually set the time or go backwards and engage with the winding pinion that winding pinion is turning teeth on the bottom side of that ratchet or of the crown wheel, and it will wind your watch. So, that little yoke is what pushes that part back and forward to, depending upon what position you pull the crown out to. So we lubricated some of the mating surfaces between the setting lever and the yoke. And I'm using a bit more grease here. I wasn't happy with the amount I had on there at first. And there's the post where the setting lever spring is going to engage. This little spring here is stout. Let me tell you, this is the yoke spring. So I'm going to kind of work this in. I just kind of keep it in one shot. But a stiff little spring, not a big spring, but it is really stiff. So we'll get it into the main plate there on that side and then kind of pull it back and get it on the top side of that yoke. And I want to make sure to press it down fully because I don't want this part flying off. It'd fly 1,000,000 miles if this thing popped off the watch. Now I'm going to pull it back just a hair, and I got some more of that grease, and I'm going to apply it to the inside of that spring where it's going to make contact with that yoke. Just like that. So before we can put our setting lever spring on there, that setting lever spring is going to cover this intermediate wheel and part of the minute wheel. So I want to go ahead and get the rest of this motion work gear train put into place. So we lubricated that spot there for the minute wheel and put that gear on, or for the intermediate wheel. And this is the minute wheel post and a little raceway for that. And I'm going to apply some grease here to the post of that second wheel where the cannon pinion is going to go on. So now we can put this cannon pinion in place. Again, I'm kind of bending my brass. It looks like I'm pressing down real hard, but it's just because my brass tweezers are flexing there. But that felt like the right amount of tension. Those are friction fit. Now here comes our minute wheel. That part really cleaned up nicely. Now we can put on our setting lever spring. So this index is on 2 posts, just like that. If I can make up my mind, there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and just put the screw down. I'm not tightening it, just getting it set into place where that part won't move or won't fly off. And I'm going to go ahead and apply some grease. I've already got some on the post of the setting lever, but just a bit more here. And I'm over greasing this, and we'll clean up the excess later, but I don't like having this dry when I first start function testing. So there we go. Put a fair amount of grease in there. I'm going to go ahead and pull this arm back and get it set onto that post. And it popped off that lower pivot. So there we go. Holding that part down, and now we can go ahead and tighten this thing properly. There we go. Now I can clean up some of that excess grease that kind of smudged out as we set that spring into place. And then the first time you actually start function testing it, moving it back and forth, more of that grease will the rest of the excess will come out, and we'll clean it up again before we're all said and done. So now we're going ahead and lubricating the stem. There we go. That's set into place, and now we go ahead and tighten this screw. I actually went back before I was done. I went back and had a second go at doing some more rust removal and all that on that stem, and then and polishing that stem when I did the case as well. So the way you see the stem right now is not the way it'll be finally. I probably should have done all that work to start, but I had another go with a fiberglass brush and all that, and removed as much of that as I possibly could. And I'll tell you, it was a monster trying to get that old gasket material out from inside of that stem. An absolute pain. Got it done though. So it's got a fresh gasket, but geez, that was a pain. With all that assembled and functioning correctly, we can go ahead and I'm applying some oil here onto that cannon pinion where the hour wheel is going to sit. That is so named because that is a wheel that the hour hand actually mounts to, and is geared in such a way where the minute wheel with that smaller pinion, it is going to rotate once an hour. There's our dial washer. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of spot check this. Any mark I see, this movement has some marks on it, so not everything comes up, but anything I see, I'm going to go ahead and give it a dab with Rodico to try to remove it. Here comes our dial. I think this dial's got a heck of a lot of character. This angle right here in the way the light sees it, when it's on your wrist, you don't even see 1/10 of those marks. I mean, you only see that under macro, but even then it's not bad. It gives it character. So we're tightening the 2 dial feet screws, holding that dial on. And now it comes time for the hands. So I'm just kind of gently getting the sub-seconds hand on there. And now I'm microscope footage that looked right through the eyepiece. The camera was atrocious, but I'm just using my tool there to seat it down fully and make sure that it's level. Now we can put on the rest of the hands, starting with the hour hand. And I wasn't entirely thrilled with this footage, but I'd already pressed it home a little bit, so I kind of switched it around. And honestly, looking at it now, it's not that much better. But we'll go ahead and get this hour hand pressed home all the way. Next up is our minute hand. So go ahead and get that one pressed down. And one more for good measure. Now it's time to go ahead and put this back into the case. And you can see that case looking a lot better than it did before. Like I said, we obviously have the stem and crown removed, but we'll load this in from the front. And I went ahead and refinished those 2 case retaining screws that were heavily corroded when we first removed them from the watch. The first 2 screws we pulled out of this watch. Those have all been refinished and just completely redone. So now it's time to go ahead and install the crystal. So we have our original crystal, although I don't have the proper bottom stump to do this. That little plastic one seems to do the job just fine. We're going to go ahead and squeeze that down, and I got to get my hands around this bezel, which is not easy. So we'll tip it over here. There we go. So I'm squeezing that crystal down, reducing the diameter of it, and then bringing the bezel up into position. Once I fill it in that channel, we'll release tension on the crystal. It'll expand and fill that bezel. So there was one tiny little mark there at about the 5 o'clock position. If you rewind it and kind of pause it there, you could barely see that scratch where the light hit it just right in that camera shot. But that's not the only thing. It's basically it's really difficult to notice, even if you know where it is, just in natural light. Got our case back on, and when now time to put the bezel back on. There's a little cutout on that bezel to accommodate the crown or the stem. So we're just making sure that's indexed properly, and go ahead and popping this bezel back on and snapping it into place, making sure it's secured all the way around. And there we have it. And I really think this watch cleaned up super nice. I think that rose gold is just the hue of that rose gold is just gorgeous. But yeah, what do you think? I know that's an original or an authentic Omega crown, but to my eye, it looks more gold than rose gold. I'm not positive, but that's what was on the watch when I got it, and I'm keeping it just like it is. I think the color shade's just a hair less rose and more yellow, but it matches it pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and get the strap put on. I'm going to keep the alligator strap just to kind of. I'm going to keep it, but I'm going to put a distressed leather strap on the watch. I like it. It's from a brand out of Canada that they make them to order. I don't know if I should be promoting names or anything, but it's a company they hand make their straps out of Canada, and I like them because I can order them to length. They do really great work, and the price is actually really reasonable for the quality that you get. So I'm going to go ahead and put that distressed leather strap on this watch. Remove this tape. We'll remove it off the other side as well. I'm just going to try this watch on here. Like I said, I've got large wrists, so this watch is 35 millimeters, which is an appropriate size for the time for a men's watch. I really like it. A lot of people probably say it's a little, you know, small for me. The buckle on that strap is metal. I'll put a gold buckle on it at some point. But I really love this watch. I think it turned out beautifully. There's one more shot here at the very end of me wearing it, kind of in natural light, not at the workbench, and I think it fits me actually quite nicely. I really love this watch. I think it looks gorgeous. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Special thank you to Peter for providing this watch. It means a lot. Thank you so much. If you like the content, like the channel, please like and subscribe. It really, really does help. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.